Thanks everyone for coming back to us. We're now going to start a topic which is one of my favourite topics, which is leadership and teams. The most important people in the surgery, apart from obviously the mad raving fans. So we shall start off with this, one of my favourite sayings actually. So, our plans miscarry because they have no aim. When a man does not know which harbour he is making for, no wind is in the right direction. Does that make sense? Yeah? It's so true. And I think really this is about looking at you as a potential new principal or a principal of a practice. To me, this is all about you being a navigator of a ship, of a boat. Of course, oaring the ship and being the captain is another term for it. But one of the most important jobs when you are sailing a ship is, of course, being the navigator. Having a plan, making a plan of where your ship is going, where the boat is going, and then, of course, following that. You could almost argue that anyone could take over the helm and steer the ship. Really, it's the navigator's job to plan the journey and to plan the destination and to plan everybody's roles in that journey across the waters, shark-infested waters. So, really important statement to start with. Okay, we've got 3 phrases here. Can anybody tell me, have a think about them, they're very famous. Who has said them? We'll do them one at a time. By working together, we can build the country of our dreams. Anybody know? Hands up. Who said that? Pardon? Anyone? Any guesses? Go on. Just Reagan? No. Pardon?
Abraham Lincoln? Or George, or Washington?
No. Lincoln? No.
David Cameron.
He's making important statements, is he? No. Churchill? No. All right, I'm going to tell you this one. You have to get the next one. Nelson Mandela. Okay, so that was Nelson Mandela. Now, the next one might be closer to what you were all mentioning just now. America, the richest and most powerful nation in the world, can well lead the way in this revolution of values. Okay, that was Martin Luther King. And the last one, I'll give you a clue, it's a bit closer to home. Changing Britain for the better, for good. Not a society where all succeed equally, that is utopia, but an opportunity society where all have an equal chance to succeed. No, you're getting close. Tony Blair, well done. Tony Blair, that's right. So, all very different statements, but saying the same thing. It's all about motivating, and it's all about leading the people that are going to take you along this journey. So, this is about successful leadership. So we're now talking about you being the leaders of your practice, your business, your journey, your ship, your life. And there are quite a few things that we have to try and get right to be successful leaders, some of which you wouldn't normally think would be up there. But I think, to be honest, the top of my list certainly is being humble and having the will to do whatever it takes to do. You've got to be prepared really as a principal dentist to do all the jobs that need to be done. And through my time, and I'm sure some of the principals, good principals that you've had in your time, you'll be doing everything from cleaning the toilets to handing out leaflets to recruiting new staff while you're handing out leaflets to being receptionist, nurse, dentist, hygienist, all those jobs, sometimes all in one day, sometimes all in separate days. But the humility to not sort of say, well, this isn't really my job, why am I doing that? I'm a dentist, why should I be the cleaner? Well, because it's your practice and the cleaner isn't here. So unless you want to see a really dirty toilet when your mad raving fan walks through the door, then you better get on your hands and knees and clean the toilet. So it's about having that humility. It's about having natural ambition. We know that. You're here. You're obviously all naturally ambitious. You've got to be hardworking, which again, I'm sure you all are. You're here on a Sunday, so you are naturally all hardworking people. And so one of the things you can do right now, actually, is just score, if you have a principal, which most of you do have, and if you are a principal, then score yourself. Just think about how they rate in all of these areas. Just have a mental note of how you think they rate as a principal, or you yourself rate as a principal. Once in, and I'm sure you've all got stories like this, but once in Wandsworth there was a terrible accident on one of the main link roads. The receptionist and the nurse were heavily delayed. I was quite heavily pregnant, but I just had to get on. The patient was there waiting. The patient had to get on to go somewhere else, so I couldn't delay them or cancel them. So I just got them in, took the phone with me, locked the door, went into surgery and just got on with it. You know, didn't do anything majorly blood drawing, so that was okay. But, you know, it's one of those things. Sometimes you have to do things, they're not according to protocol. You just have to get on there and you have to do it. Luckily, especially if you are a dentist, you're in the position to be able to do most, if not all, roles within your practice, which is quite a unique position to be in, because there aren't many people within your practice that can do all these roles. And so you need to just get your head around that, because that's something, again, as an associate, you don't have to do. You go in there, you do your dentistry, you walk out. You're very rarely, if ever, asked to be a hygienist, certainly not to be a nurse, certainly never to be a cleaner. But as a principal, I'll tell you right now, you'll be doing all those jobs. So, because the buck, at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, no one else. That's quite a position of responsibility. And actually, on that note, and I think I was mentioning this to somebody earlier about payments, and they were saying, well, how do we pay ourselves? How do we get an income out of this business? And that's something which we discussed. And I said, but the most important thing first, as a leader or as a payor, is that you pay all your staff. And I remember having this conversation with my practice manager very, very early on in Wandsworth. I said to her, I said, you know, it came up to I think the first payday, and I had very little money. I had to take a loan to pay everybody and all the rest. And I said to her, I said, you know, this is really weird, because as an associate, you never think about paying anyone. I said, this, for the first time, this might seem obvious to you, but for me as a new principal, I've got this big burden on my shoulders, because I'm now responsible for the 4 of you. Your livelihoods depend on me. So forget paying myself. I've got to make sure that there's enough money to pay all of you, and in a timely fashion, because who wants to work for somebody who doesn't pay them? But that, just the mental change of being in that position where you are responsible for people's livelihoods, their families, their children, everything is all dependent on you, was just a bit of a mind shift, huge mind shift change for me. And that's something you need to also be thinking about. So, steps to more powerful leadership. I mean, these are quite obvious, to be honest. I think the most important, from my point of view, well, actually, forget my point of view. Can anybody think? Look at the points. They're not in any particular order. Tell me which one of these speaks to you. Any that speak to you that you think is the most important point for being a powerful leader.
Put your heart into the business and its people.
Put your heart into the business. Brilliant. And its people. Great. Anyone else?
Be the person you know you were made to be.
Be the person you know. Oh, that's so powerful. It makes my hair stand on end. Absolutely. Be the person you know you were made to be. That's really powerful. Anyone else?
Lead by example.
Lead by example. Excellent as well, yeah.
Have fun.
Have fun. Brilliant. And you will have fun. Very comical moments along the way. You will. It's very funny. It's so bad it's funny is what I mean. Anyone else?
Decide to make a significant difference.
Brilliant.
You want to make history.
Yes. Now, wow, isn't that powerful? You want to make your mark. You want to make a significant difference. Absolutely. And the significant difference or the significant change could be anything. It could be something in your street. It could be something in your community. And it could eventually be something global that you do with your business. But it's that need, that desire to be just a lot more than I just want to open it's almost like I want to open a corner shop. I want to open a dental practice. And why do you want to open a dental practice? Why do you want your own business? To have that in the back to say, I want to make a significant difference to this community, to me is much more powerful than I just want to open a dental practice. Yeah. Anyone else? 8. Number 8.
Treat others as you would want to be treated yourself.
Absolutely. The humility, right? The humility has to come in as a principle, definitely. You've all heard, and hopefully you weren't part of this problem, but where nurses come to you and you say, oh, you know, he treated me or she treated me so badly, and they just throw instruments at me and they just treat me like I'm something off their shoe. You know, that really angers me, because that's just it's not a way to treat a human being, whoever they are. So, you know, that's absolutely right. So the thing that speaks to me the most, I mean, all of these are very, very important, but to me is number 1. It wasn't made like that, but to me, if you let your passion show within your business, for your people, for your team, if they can see your passion, they can see your vision, they can see your mission, they can see that you live, breathe everything, this business, this motto, this vision, and what it is that you're doing. If you can show them that, or that will show, others will buy it. It's very infectious. People will take that from you. They will take that energy and they will run with it. To be honest, all of these points are extremely, extremely important, but it's funny how different points speak to different people in different ways. Okay, so the characteristics of strong leaders. Okay, so again, this starts at yourself. It starts at you being self-aware. Anybody know what self-aware means in this context? What I mean by self-aware?
Aware of your weaknesses and strengths.
Perfect. I thought you were going to say aware of my haircut, aware of my clothes, aware of my... No, you're absolutely right. To be self-aware is, again, something for me, I remember very, very categorically, the biggest change for me was, as an associate, all I knew was what my strengths were. I just knew that I was a fabulous dentist. This area I was really good at. This area I wasn't so good at, but who cares? Let's focus on my strengths. I just focused on my strengths. I can speak to people, patients, I can get big treatment plans signed. I'm a popular dentist. That's all that mattered to me. As a principal, very quickly, I learned what were my weaknesses. And believe me, I've got many. But as a principal, my strengths didn't really matter. It was more what my weaknesses were. And that's what that means, self-aware. Target-driven, this is now a business that you're running. Whether it's an NHS clinic, whether it's a private clinic, this is a business that you're running. You need to set yourself targets. You need to set your team targets, which we'll talk about more in a while. Relationship hungry. This is a business for people. It's all about people, and you're working with people, and you're working for people. Okay? If you're not somebody who sort of enjoys the person-to-person contact, then in some ways being an associate is probably a better role for you, because as a principal you will have to encounter, interact and engage with people every single day, all day. Organisation, you have to know that you belong to, even though you've created it, you belong to an organisation. It needs to have rules, it needs to have regulations, it needs to have protocols, probably produced by you, but you need to run to specific standards within the practice, and that's the standard of the organisation that you have produced. And so different people veering off also have to be not controlled but managed in a certain way. The fact is, it's an organisation. It's not just you as an island going in every Monday and Wednesday and Friday doing your dentistry and walking out. That's a very easy life. This is an organisation. Then you have to also think about the fact that you're in a practice, but this practice is linked to the neighbourhood. It's linked to the street, it's linked to the village, it's linked to so many different things. I had, about 2 weeks ago in Wandsworth, we had a street party. It was an annual street party. It's a music festival, and the whole street is closed. It's a fabulous event, only once a year, sadly. But we had a stand outside our practice, which was unusual because one of the other dentists didn't. It was mostly restaurants and other knickknacks, selling knickknacks, and we were obviously not selling a product, we were selling ourselves. But it was lucky because the practice was behind us, and we were out there giving our bags out and various things. So it was brilliant, because what happened is local businesses would come to us and say, oh, hello, I'm from so-and-so, and we're neighbours. Or I went to other stall holders and I said, oh, hi, we're the local dentist, and nice to meet you, and here's our information, please come and see us, we would love to look after you, etc., etc. Let's give each other business, let's help each other. And I struck it off with struck up a good rapport with somebody from Venture Studios. Have you heard of Venture Photographers? Anyone? So they're really high-end portrait photographers. So you go in there and you get all these high-end, probably similar to that, but with humans, photographic sessions, which apparently retail at £315 for a session. So you go in, you have your photographs taken, and you get, I don't know, hair and makeup and whatnot, and then for that, you get one portrait free. And the idea being, of course, is that you love them so much that you buy all these other ones that are about £500 each. You can have them on canvas, stretched, all sorts of things, similar to this. So I struck it up with the manager there, and it reminded me of a relationship I had with one of the business relationship, obviously, with one of the ex-managers of Venture right at the beginning, and we sort of rekindled this relationship for now, which was, he said, well, why don't I give you some vouchers to your patients your special patients, give them these vouchers, and then from there they can come have their photographs taken, and for free, you don't pay anything. And that way, you're giving them something, we're giving them something, and hopefully we've got customers through the door, they'll enjoy the experience. And I said, that's fantastic. So I then wrote up a protocol, which essentially was similar to what I used to do many years ago. Let's say you're one of these high-spending patients. We could give you the Ritz vouchers, or we could give you this. It's different things, having different things to hand. And you're helping a local business, which is always much better than helping the Ritz, which, you know, it's helping each other, scratching each other's backs. So what we're going to do for them is we're going to say, dear Susie, thank you so much for spending the time and letting us look after your smile. We want you to show off your smile. And so we want you to go to the fabulous photographic studio down the road. Here are vouchers, compliments of the neem tree. Please go and get yourself photographed and come and show us the photos. Right, so three-pronged approach there. A, you're helping local business. B, you're giving them something worth £315. We all know it's not £315, but it looks good. £315. We're giving them, C, we're giving them something relevant to their smile. In other words, it's a photograph. And D, so there's 4 points. D, we're asking them to come back and show us the photos because, of course, we can then take a photo and put it on all of our social media, on our websites, because obviously we've had their permission. Right? So we don't have to worry about consent. So there's quite a few boxes ticked there. Anyway, I was delighted with that one kind of rapport build that day. So the point is you're part of a neighborhood, you're part of a street, and then of course you're globally concerned. Some practices now having carbon neutral practices built, all these sorts of things, the recycling, the electricity, all sorts, you know, is going on. You've just got to be globally concerned. So, leaders. Does anybody think the word leader and the word boss is the same thing? No, why not? Similar. Anybody think it is the same, leader and boss? Okay, yeah?
It can be, but not always.
Okay, all right. So, my opinion, there's a big difference between a leader and a boss. Okay, and this is the difference. A boss will say go, and a leader will say, let's go. That's the difference. Huge difference. And really, you've got to think more about, in this position that you're hopefully going to be in very soon, is you've got to try and become a leader rather than a boss. Of course, in fact, I still get very, very uncomfortable when people say to me, oh, you know, she's the boss, or hello, boss, or I just don't like that phrase. It implies many things, and I prefer the word principal or leader or whatever it might be, but boss. But anyway, it's about getting your head around the difference between a leader and between a boss. So the question is, do you possess the right leadership skills? That's what we've got to start thinking about. So what are the leadership skills that you might need? So you'll want to lead people on the journey that you're embarking upon. Now, this takes us back to the first day of what our vision was. So, and then having the passion to show what our vision is. And then after you've shown that passion, it's about sharing it and actually getting people in your team to have either A, when they come in, they have that passion and that vision with you, or B, when they join you, is convincing them that this is the right way forward and having that filter through to the rest of your team. Because if it filters through to the rest of your team, it will filter through to your patients. And that's how you will, one of the journeys that eventually makes a mad raving fan. If you have a dentist or a team leader who's just not really that bothered, and it's just like, oh yeah, it's a dental practice, all right, isn't it? Yeah. Kind of needs a bit of dirty, it needs a bit of cleaning there, and don't really like her, she's a bit useless. But you know what, just see her, she'll be all right, she'll fit you in. That sort of attitude will never create a mad raving fan. Your mad raving fans want to see that you live, breathe, eat, drink this practice. Everything about it is absolutely on top of the world, and they need to see that from the rest of the team. So, now this is really cool. It's a bit of an exercise. Okay, so get your pens ready in a minute. So, now, this is more about trying to get to the bottom of who you actually are, or what type of person you actually are. We're not talking about, are you a practice manager, are you a principal, or are you Richard Branson? That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what kind of person are each of you. 3 types of people we're looking at here. This is all to try and see what kind of leader you're going to make. So, I'll take it the other way around actually, the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is the idea generator. They're the ones with their heads in the cloud, the feet aren't on the ground, they're coming up with all these unbelievable ideas, great, every day, no idea how they're going to work, no idea who's going to make them happen, but they don't care. They're just, oh yeah, brilliant idea, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, this is going to work, that's going to work. No idea how it's going to happen, don't care. That's the entrepreneur. So, is anybody an entrepreneur? Just think about it. The leader is the sort of person who will translate these wonderful ideas, brilliant schemes, brilliant deals, and actually translate them to the rest of the team, and they will then move forward. They only know one direction. A leader only really knows one direction, and that direction is forward. Yeah, they don't know back, they just know forward. We are going to move forward, all of us. Not you, but we. We're all going to go. This is what we've decided. This is how it's going to work. It's going to be wonderful because they're motivating. It's going to be wonderful. We're all going to move forward in this direction. That's a leader. And they'll also have a business plan to translate it, and they'll have all the workings of it as well, because they also are the idea generator, but they just have their feet a bit more on the ground. And they have the skills of talking to people as well, whether it's a nurse, whether it's a hygienist, whether it's a specialist implantologist, whoever it might be, they can speak on many different levels and translate these ideas to these people with some energy. That's a leader. Manager. Manager, so as I said, with a leader, the only direction they know is forward. With a manager, the only direction they know is right here, right now. They manage. They are the jugglers of the balls. They are like, oh my God, I can multitask. I can do this. Yes, I can do. Yeah, we've got a leak in the roof. Yeah, we've got that. And the hygienist chair's just broken down. No problem. We've got 5 patients waiting. Let me see how I'm going to manage those. Oh, I need a TCO as well. Oh my God, yes, I've got a TCO as well. And oh, okay, we've got some other problem. The stock hasn't arrived. How am I going to wing this? So they are the day-to-day nitty-gritty type of people. They're the ones who know how to stay static but not stand still. Makes sense? So they're stationary, but they're not standing still. They're juggling. They're doing all of this. So the question is, they're the ones who play with all the team. They deal with all the problems. They love solving problems. They are the problem solvers. Leaders aren't the problem solvers. Entrepreneurs certainly aren't the problem solvers. But managers are problem solvers. It's get in there. Oh, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to get it. And at the end of the day, they feel fantastic because they've solved one problem. Or 15 problems, but they are the problem solvers. So the question is, I would like to ask you to take about 5 minutes to make a note on your piece. Again, this is useful, this is for you, to make a note and actually work out, again, just keep writing, write down which one of these you are and why you think you are that person. And really give us some detail, give yourself some detail. Okay, I'm an entrepreneur because I do this, and these are examples of this. And I'm not a good manager because when I came up with these entrepreneurial ideas, I didn't do this. And name them all. And then the second part to this exercise is, while you're writing down what you are, by the side of it, use another column and write down what are your weaknesses. Because if you're any one of them, you might actually be more than one, you might be 2. You're generally not 3, because they're a bit mutually exclusive. Certainly the top and the bottom one are. But you might be one of 2, you might be drawing a Venn diagram, I don't know, make it however you feel it will be useful, but write down what your weaknesses are, because we'll talk about those in a little bit. So, 29 past, let's take 5 minutes to write them all down. Please, go for it. Okay, thank you everybody. Now, what we're going to do is pair up again. Yay! So, if you wouldn't mind, person next to you, doesn't matter if you know them now. Although I'm not sure about you two, because you know each other too well. So it would be nice to mix you up, if possible. Because this is a great exercise. I'd like you to tell your partner who you are, why, and what your weaknesses are. And share it. Because in the sharing, the other person will learn a lot about themselves. There's actually a lot to be said about the sharing. So please, pair up. And if there's an odd number, then maybe 3 of you. Thank you, everyone. You know what I'm going to ask next. We have to have some sharers. Come on. Who's going to volunteer? Don't make me pick. Thank you. Go for it. So tell us about, firstly, tell us about yourself. Which one of these are you, and what are your weaknesses? And then if your partner wouldn't mind sharing, that would be nice as well. Oh, you can tell us both. It's up to you.
So I couldn't relate to one category completely.
Which one's that?
I couldn't.
Oh, you couldn't relate to a single one. Okay, good. Yeah, it's fine. You're a very three-dimensional person.
Certainly not the last one.
Okay.
The bits of both first two.
Okay.
But I've only sort of led my own family, so I can't say I'm a leader. I don't have proof.
Okay. Yeah.
And manager, I think most women are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think it's any
Multitasking. I'm glad you said it. I was going to say it, but I better not. Okay.
So that's the end of that.
Okay, great. So you'd say you're more manager stroke a bit of leader as well, judging from your
Just from my
personal, yeah,
but
fair
I don't
enough.
have anything to prove anymore.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's lots of negatives.
It's always good to have lots of negatives because you can work on them.
Yeah, well,
Or more importantly, you can employ people to help you work on them.
I suppose.
Yeah, go.
So the first one is I've not led any teams,
Okay,
and I'm really bad at delegation.
okay. Do you want to do everything yourself? Okay.
I'm easily frustrated by people's lack of enthusiasm.
Yeah, okay.
And I can't relate to sluggish and less motivated people.
Lazy people. Yeah,
And so because I'm self-driven,
yeah.
I'm better off as an associate.
Yeah. Well, you have very high standards, very high standards of behaviour, work, and you don't like lazy people, which is good. But you see, all of these things, yes, it makes you a very good associate, but it just depends on the team that you will eventually employ, right? Because hopefully there are other people like you. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. You're not necessarily going to get the perfect team first day, but if you know what your weaknesses are, it's so helpful to the team that you employ. Brilliant, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Would you like to share?
I think I'm more a manager.
You're more a manager, okay?
I can multitask.
Yeah, good.
Good at delegating.
Yeah, you are good at delegating.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, good, yeah.
But I get frustrated quite easily.
Yeah,
Negatives, I am quite cynical. I can be emotional as well.
yeah,
I think I should be more rational. I say that
Yeah.
to myself.
yeah,
And sometimes perfectionism, that can be a weakness, I think. I expect people to be, oh, why are they not getting this?
Yeah.
I understand it. Why can't you understand
Yeah.
it? Especially with nurses or receptionists. Of
course.
So I think that can be a negative.
yes.
Expecting everyone to be like you.
Perfectionism is a double-edged sword. It can be a really good thing or it can be a really bad thing. It depends on who's watching.
I do find it difficult to translate and drive forward. Although I have the
Yeah.
ideas of it, I can't put it across to them and motivate them to make them see my point. That's the biggest negative.
Okay.
I know where.
Yeah.
What
But it's translating it to others. Okay, all right. Well, that's really useful to know. I mean, well, I'll talk more about knowledge of these weaknesses in a minute. Anyone else? Thank you for sharing. Anyone else like to share? Come on, you'll get a lot more out of it if you share. Promise. One more. Okay, thank you.
So I feel I'm quite entrepreneurial.
Okay.
I come up with quite a few ideas a day. But that ties in with I've got a very short attention span.
Okay.
So I'm not really a leader. I don't push these ideas through. Also, but I do love problem solving as well.
Now that's interesting to have both
Yeah.
skills, yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I don't translate. I don't drive my ideas forward. I don't see things through a lot.
Okay, great. All right, well, great in the sense, thank you for sharing. I mean, what's really useful here, and I hope you all got something from it, is it's equally important to know who you are, as well as equally important to know what you're not so good at. And I think the reason that becomes A, critical, and B, very, very useful, is because knowing what you're weak at, these aren't weaknesses that have just arrived. These are weaknesses that you've all got, right? We've all got right now, right here, right now. So these are things that you're carrying around with you, but the weaknesses don't really matter when you're an associate because everything's kind of arranged or aligned in such a way that the weaknesses don't really matter. Whereas as a principal, the weaknesses are accentuated But the good news is that that's fine, they're accentuated, but you can then employ a team to take care of all these weaknesses. Whereas as an associate, you can't employ a team to take care of all these weaknesses, but then that's not really important as an associate anyway. So yes, it's a bit of bad news, but actually it's good news with the bad news. So there's a problem, but there's also a solution. Okay, so I mean, one of the things that I noticed when I first opened up the practice is I was a bit of a perfectionist, although I was totally, I still am to a big degree, very, very disorganized. I'm very much into ideas and planning things on the moment, not so much making plans, but like, let's say the books are quiet for tomorrow, let's come up with this, let's do a lunchtime offer. Yeah, but we haven't planned for that, Smita. Don't care, let's just plan it now, let's just do it now, let's just do it. Much more of a doer than a planner, which, yes, is good in some ways, but it's bad in other ways. So your inherent personality doesn't change, whether you're an associate or whether you're a principal, but how you deal with it and who's around you, you can place who's around you, whereas as an associate, you can't place who's around you. Do you see the difference, yeah? So that's really, really important. And I wanted, similar to what you were saying, you want to do everything yourself. You can't, couldn't really delegate very well. So I would, in the early days, I would take the phone with me at home. If somebody called me on a Sunday, I would take the call and say, yes, of course we're open on a Sunday. I'll see you in the practice in about an hour. I'm fully booked. I wasn't fully booked. I was at home with baby. But I would just dump everything, get to the practice, deal with it. And I wouldn't call upon my associates because I didn't want to trouble them. You know, or we had this thing where I used to have fresh green apples every day, and I took it upon myself to go and source and buy these green apples from Sainsbury's, funnily enough, at the time, and I wouldn't let anyone else buy them because no one else could buy green apples like I could buy green apples, you know, which was absolutely ridiculous, you know, and you've got to know which jobs you can delegate and which jobs only you can do. And what I have learned over the last few years is to focus on jobs that only you can do and let everybody else who can do the other jobs do them. And that's a big mind shift, especially for somebody who doesn't know how to delegate, especially for somebody who thinks that only they can do everything to a certain standard. That's actually, it might seem like it's a good thing, but it's not a good thing. It does drive you potty. So be aware. Anyway, thank you for that exercise. Useful for you to take away and learn a little bit more about yourself. Yeah? So, teams, creating better teams. So once you turn a vision into a mission, so the vision that you took from Friday, and you turn that into a bit of a mission and a bit of a mission statement, that's when your business and your business model will start to take shape. And for this, does anybody know what you need to take a vision into a mission? Team, absolutely. Thank you very much. A vision is something you don't need anybody for. You just need your mind. You don't even need a piece of paper. You just need your mind. However, to make it into a mission, to actually make it happen, you need people. You cannot do this on your own. Okay? So creating a better team is all about your mission, and it ultimately leads back to your vision. Okay? And as our lovely friend Henry Ford says again, a business which makes nothing but money is a poor business. It is all about your vision, but it is ultimately a people's business. It's about the team that you have. Your team are your biggest challenge, but they are also your biggest asset. I always, you know, to Owen, I'm always complaining, oh, this has happened, and he's happened, and she's happened, and she's in this and that. I mean, I've heard every possible excuse in the book as to why staff aren't turning up, I mean, I went to the Isha practice yesterday, and a temp nurse that she's sort of a temp nurse, but she comes quite regularly. This woman is crazy. Any possible thing that could happen happens to her. She didn't turn up the day before, and I said to her, why weren't you here? She said, oh, well, I was involved in a bus crash. I got on the bus, somebody came through the back of me, I got whiplash, my daughter got whiplash, that's why I couldn't turn up. And I'm thinking, well, why are you here today? And then another time, she literally texted me, I'm sorry I can't come tomorrow, because a really good friend of mine was walking on the street, and he got run over by some car, and he's just died, and he's left 7 children, all with the same baby mummy. And I looked at this and I thought, what does that even mean? And I just thought, this is so crazy. So what I'm saying is you will be faced with all sorts of excuses. Say baby mummy, that's the best bit. It's like there's meant to be more than one mother. Anyway, so what I'm saying is that it is a people's business, it is about your team, and it's about creating a team. So yes, I do suffer with, as I'm sure many of you will relate to, team issues, but if I'm honest, you would be nowhere without your team. I mean, and when they're good, they are fantastic. They're absolutely fantastic. And when you see them there, you feel almost like a mother or a father. When somebody comments, when I see some other friends or whatnot that go to the practice and they comment and they talk about, oh, you know, so-and-so at your practice, he's absolutely phenomenal, best dentist I've ever seen. He's worked wonders for me and he's made me smile again. And you really do feel like you push your chest out and you feel like a mother or a father who is so proud of their children, which is your team, essentially. So, wonderful feeling, but they are a big challenge. But at the end of the day, it's worth it. But it's all about the right team. So, finding a team. Now, this is an interesting slide. Okay, where do you advertise? We've had quite a few questions this weekend, actually, on how do you get a dentist, how do you get a nurse, how do you get a receptionist, how do you get a hygienist. Now, I'll go into that in a second, but one of the things that I'd like to ask you first, you've got two types of people. Would you rather, let's just take a dentist. Would you, if you're looking for an associate, bless you, if you're looking for an associate, would you rather get lots of CVs and pick the best qualified, most highly qualified, highly trained dentist, or would you pick somebody who's pretty average but actually shows a lot of other skills, a good attitude, a good work ethic, and somebody who can multitask with their day-to-day work? Who would go for the most highly qualified, skilled up person? Pardon?
Depends what you want.
Yes, depends what you want, and it depends. I mean, obviously, with this highly qualified one, it's wonderful for your website, it's wonderful for marketing, it's wonderful for telling people I've got such and such. Absolutely, especially if you want a specialist, you want them to be, you know. But even as a specialist, the rules, in my mind, are the same. Personally, I would rather pick somebody with the right attitude and the right work ethic than somebody who's purely highly qualified to the hilt, but actually offers not a lot more. Okay? Because what we've got to remember now as an employer, because that's what you all will be, as an employer, that person that you're employing has to be a people's person, because every day when they come in, they will be faced with people, whether they're a hygienist, whether they're a dentist, whether they're a receptionist, a PM, whoever they are in this business because they need to be people's, this is a people's business. Okay? What I usually do when I interview people, whoever they might be, is I put myself in the place of a patient. And I think, especially for a dentist or a hygienist, I'll think, do I feel comfortable with him or her? Do they make me feel at ease? Or do I, as soon as I see them, I think, I'm a bit scared of you actually, I'm a bit nervous. Or do they exude confidence, but do they exude too much confidence? And it makes me think they're a bit of a cowboy or a bit of a, oh yeah, don't worry, I'll get you sorted, don't worry, a 50 grand treatment plan, no worries, you know. That sort of person, again, is not what I'm talking about when I talk about confidence. So put yourself in the position of a patient, and for a receptionist, again, your receptionist is your shop window. Receptionist is the first port of call when a patient calls or turns up. How do you feel when you talk to this potential candidate? Is she or he approachable, smiley demeanor? Doesn't mean they have to be made up and, you know, tottering about. It just means, are they pleasant to look at, in the sense that, do they have a permanent frown on their face, or do they you know, that sort of thing. So that's the thing I would look at. But the right attitude, and I've noticed this through the years, gets you a lot further, because you can train them. Nothing of what we do, I mean, obviously I'm not talking about specialists and dentists, I'm talking about the rest of the team. Nothing of what we do is rocket science. Everything can be trained, okay? But the right attitude, I think you're just born with, or at least is inherent. So I would just be wary of that. Now, where do you advertise? Okay, so for dentists, does anybody know where you would go to? Where would any of you go to if tomorrow you needed a dentist in this new practice, shiny new practice? BDJ, brilliant. Anywhere else?
Recruitment websites.
Recruitment websites, great. Anywhere else? Gumtree, great. Facebook, great. Yeah. What did he say, sorry? Ask around, yeah. People you know. Do you know anyone who's like you? I want someone as good as you. Can you recommend? Great. All of these are absolutely right. They're absolutely brilliant. Gumtree, I would be a little bit wary of dentists on Gumtree, but the rest of your auxiliary team, definitely. We've got some brilliant recruits from Gumtree in the past, although it was more successful before than it is now, because now, as you know, Gumtree is just full of agencies advertising, and yet they charge you for it and they've got them free, sort of thing. So, so with dentists, specialist dentists, and even hygienists, then I think BDJ, this is what's worked for us anyway. BDJ has worked very, very well. It's relatively cheap, £150, £200 maximum, and you get online straight away, and you get online access, and you'll be flooded. Every time we've put a BDJ ad on, we get absolutely flooded. So now what we do is we put really quite aggressive adverts on. When I say aggressive, I mean, 10 years plus qualified, this specialism, people's person. In other words, it's very specific. But in the olden days, it just used to say, nice dentist, come for this job, whatever. It's get in excess of about 60 CVs. I mean, how do you sift through 60 CVs? It's crazy. So what I've learned now is that the way you word your adverts, you have to put it, it's got to be what's on the tin. This is a specific job, I just need these people. So if you haven't, got these skills, then thank you very much. But even having said all of this, you will get surprised when they do eventually turn up for interview. I remember a very nice German gentleman who applied for a job in Wandsworth many years ago, and he was highly qualified. Anyway, I invited him for interview, and there were quite a few candidates coming and going, and then there was him and a lady sitting next to each other, and I called him in, and I said, Dr. So-and-so, and he said, who do you want? I went, pardon? And he said, do you want me or my wife? And I looked at him as if to say, what do you mean, you or your wife? This is a bit odd question. And he said, well, we're both dentists. We've both worked in my clinic in Germany, and now we both come here to look for a job. And I'm thinking, well, she didn't even apply for the job. I don't know her from Adam. What's going on? So people, even though on their CVs they might seem a bit normal, you will get surprised when they turn up for interview what sort of things you'll get faced with. And you've got to be able to deal with that without looking too surprised. So yes, with the dentist, BDJ, sifting through their CVs, that in itself is a task. If somebody wants to talk about that, I could talk about sifting through CVs for 5 hours with you if you like, because what I try and do with dentists is do a 3-stage interview. So it's a 3 interviews, and whittle them down to the last 2 or 3, and then we make choices. So we get them in for a clinical interview, a management interview, and a business interview. And that way you try and get more of a 3D image of what they're like, because they're not just, we don't think of associates as just associates who come and drill and fill. They need to be quite 3-dimensional people, because what we're looking for is people. It's a people's business. So that's dentists, and similarly with hygienists, perhaps not as rigorous, but similarly with hygienists. One of the things with the dentist interview, what I used to do a lot of, which I still do occasionally, is I'll give them probably the 3rd stage. I do what's called a disc model. Has anybody heard of a disc model? Yeah? Anyone not heard of a disc model? Okay, so a disc model is, it's basically personality profiling. God, I sound like an ogre. It's a personality profiling questionnaire. I did actually consider bringing it here, but it takes about half an hour, and I just thought, I can't do this to them. But it's brilliant. It's like a multiple choice questionnaire, and you fill it out. And the questions, you can't really make up the questions because there's no right or wrong answer. And from the answers, you whittle it down to having one of 4 major personalities, as in, personality traits. So you either come out as being dominant, or you come out as being influential, or you come out as being steady, or you come out as being conscientious. So, or cautious, depending on which one you do. So these 4 put you in one category. Again, there is no right or wrong answer, but the good news is that when you do get whichever category they're in, it's really useful, because if you do this on all the team members, it's good to know that you've got a team full of all 4 categories. Because what you don't want is you don't want 4 Ds. Especially if you're a D yourself, you don't want another 4 Ds, because this is what's going to happen every day. Whereas you also don't just want 4 S's, a steady type of person, or a conscientious, cautious type of person. They'll be wonderful, there'll be peace and harmony, but nothing will get done, right? So, I mean, for me personally, and this is just a personal opinion, lots of I's are really, really good. Because if you're influential, there's a difference between being dominant and influential. Similar to the boss and the leader. A dominant person will say, go, do this for me, get that for me, do this. Whereas an influential person will say, do you mind if we could you get me that? And then we'll talk about this. And, you know, so an influential dentist is really, really useful. So an eye dentist is brilliant, whether it's you or another dentist, because an influential person will sell these big treatment plans. Why? Because they will convince the person that this is the right treatment plan for you. And they will show them the models, and they will show them all the data, and they will go through the whole thing, and they will convince, rightly so, why this treatment plan works for you. Whereas a D will just say, well, you need this. What do you mean, why? You just need this treatment plan. Go and get this treatment plan done. So an this is one of my personal favourites. So, but you don't need lots and lots of eyes. It would be good to have a bit of, do you need workhorses? You need people who are go-getters, you need people who are steady back office workers, so it's a useful one to do. But sorry, my point was that I do one exercise, which is I will give them an OPG, and I will give them a set of study models, and I will say to them that this is one patient, they both belong to the same patient, and guess what, that patient is me, and I want you to talk to me about, this is the first checkup I'm having with you. I want you to talk to me about what's wrong with me. Obviously hide all their details. I want you to explain to me what's wrong and what I need and how much it's going to cost. So I'll give them a price guide as well. So it's testing quite a few things. And again, you might think that's a bit cruel, but actually, this is their bread and butter. This is, as a dentist, this is your bread and butter. You will always be faced with PAs or OPGs, study models, treatment plans, price guides. So you would be surprised at how many people do fantastically well at the interview stage, fantastically well at the clinical, the management, the business side, and then you give them something that actually should be pretty much standard, fair, and they just crumble completely. They just don't know how to deal with it. And it's quite sad because it shows quite a few things, but it's a little bit of a worry. Yeah? So that's a dentist. With other people, so with your practice manager, with your nurse, with your receptionist, any other ideas? Anything different to what we've already said? No? Well, that's right. I mean, usually for our auxiliary team, I would look at either Gumtree. Gumtree's worked really, really well, or equivalent websites. I would look at asking people. So within my own team, especially if I've got newly qualified nurses, I will say to them, well, what about your school, where you've just qualified from? Don't you know anyone else there who would be willing to do part-time work, etc.? Because we're open 7 days, we've always got positions open. There's always something you can do. So I'm always asking them. Or one of our practice managers puts it on Facebook, so that's a good one as well. And with business groups that they know, or LinkedIn, or anything like that, would be very useful. Agencies. Now, has anyone got an opinion on agencies?
Too many emails with no results.
Lots of emails without results. Okay.
Sounds like quite an expensive way to do it in terms of getting consistent stuff. They often do like a probation period and you're committed financially and sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, usually 3 months, that's right. 12 weeks, great. So my experience of agencies it's a mixed bag. I've recently had a relatively good experience, but I've really tried to minimize the need for agencies, because in the past I've been burnt many times by agencies, and I know lots of colleagues have as well. I'll give you a very quick example of an agency that I used in our Canary Wharf practice. I had, I won't mention any names because that's not what it's about, but we put an ad out for a dental nurse, and let's just call this dental nurse Susie, for example. I applied for this dental nurse. I had lots of CVs come through, and we chose some. And one of the names on, let's say, tomorrow's interview schedule was this Susie. Now, the day before, the agency said to us, she's really sick, she can't come in tomorrow, I'm really sorry, but the others will turn up. Great, fine, carry on. Forgot about Susie. Ended up taking on somebody, whatever. Anyway, fast forward 6 months, we had another vacancy, and this Susie came in for an interview. So bear in mind, I'd seen her CV but couldn't remember it, but I hadn't actually met her through this agency, but she came back via some other, I can't remember how, but she came in and I interviewed her and we ended up giving her the job. So I think it was another agency actually. So I got billed from that new agency, and then I got a bill from this agency. And I said, what on earth is that all about? Well, why am I getting 2 bills? And they said, well, because we introduced you to her. Okay, it was 6 months ago, but we introduced you to her and she's still with us. So that to us is a successful recruitment, pay us the money. And it wasn't a small amount, it was, I don't know, £700-800 or something like that. But I'd already been billed from the new one. Anyway, I obviously sorted the new one out. This one, I just refused to pay. I just said, well, there's just no way. She hasn't come to me through you. Sure, I've seen her CV, but I've seen a million CVs. I don't even remember her through you. She's come to me through someone else. Anyway, this went on and on and on. Went to court. Went to court and lost. So I had to pay this agency. And the bottom line there was, you signed a contract, which actually my practice manager signed, but you know, when you read the fine print, you don't think, oh, and if somebody else, you come through, so you just sign it, you know, which was our naivety actually. But I didn't even see the contract. But anyway, again, buck stops with you, so it's not your PM's fault, it's yours, right? So the judge drew the conclusion purely based on the fact that you signed this contract. Here is the contract. Is this your signature or your representative's? Yes, it is. Can you see highlighted bit? This is what you've signed, that if this person through whatever means or whatever, because also that extent, so I said to them, I said, right, if I don't take your nurse from your agency, and let's say tomorrow I put a sign on the door saying vacancies, nurse vacancies, let's say they read that vacancy sign and then come to me through that sign on the window, am I still liable to pay you? Yes, you are, because of this contract. So, in conclusion, I will say, be so super aware of what you're signing. Super aware. I mean, most recently I've had this lovely American hygienist through an agency, and we agreed an hourly rate. And I remember having this conversation. Again, I signed the paperwork, but I didn't go into and their fine print isn't like half a page, it's like about 6 pages. Right? So when you've had a chat with somebody who you think you're getting on with very well, you kind of more or less sign it because you've agreed a rate, you've agreed everything. Anyway, at the end of this term, because they do this thing where you trial her for 3 months, and if you like her, then you've kind of paid for the fees and you can keep her, sort of thing. But at the end of the term, I got this huge VAT bill, so VAT added, so that's 20%. So I took this up with them. I said, I'm not paying this VAT because that wasn't agreed. We didn't agree that. When I had a conversation with you, you gave me, it was £43 an hour, £3 to the agency, £40 to her, done. Expensive, but done. And he said, oh, well, it's in the terms and conditions. I said, well, you and I discussed this, and I said to you, is £43 the total of what I'm paying per hour? Is that correct? Yes, it is correct. So I kind of trusted you on that, and yet, but again, I mean, obviously I've paid that now, but if I were not to pay that, they could do me again for, well, you've signed the contract. So, learning from all of this, read the fine print and be happy with the fine print, but with agencies, be very careful because they can sting you. I'm not saying that's the case for all agencies, and in fact, this particular agency has been a lot more transparent than many, but just be careful with agencies, yeah.
Can I ask how you've managed to recruit or change people's shifts to the kind of graveyard, really early, really late? How you motivated them to take on? Do you pay them differently, or?
No, so I don't. I mean, if you buy an existing practice, then that becomes very difficult. If you, for example, if you take over a practice that's a 9-to-5 practice and they're closed for an hour at lunchtime, put the sign on the door, closed for lunch, don't take any of the millions of calls that come in because everybody wants to call you at lunchtime. I've worked in that practice, and I just found it absolutely ludicrous, and you know, that they could operate like this. And you'd open the door and it would be raining after lunch and there'd be people queuing outside in the rain. And I just thought, oh my God. So when we talk about customer service and we talk about giving the patients everything, is that how you treat people? Excuse me. So I thought to myself, if I ever open one, the phone needs to be picked up by the second ring. I'm not saying that always happens, but I try and train people to do that. The phone should always, there'd be 2 lines. If there's a patient in front of you and the phone rings, answer the phone call, because the patient in front of you is already a patient of yours, and obviously be polite. This one on the phone could be somebody in dire pain, in need of you, or a huge treatment plan. Either way, pick the phone up. There are lots of things that I've put in place which weren't in place in previous practices that I work in. But in answer to your question, if you're taking over a practice, don't change it to start with. I think Goodman Grant were telling us a couple of days ago, when you get in 6 months, don't change anything. But after 3 to 6 months, you can start to introduce it to the staff. In a squat practice, there is no culture that you're changing. your culture is the culture.
But did you find it easy recruiting people for the really earliest? Really?
Yeah, it's the way you sell it, right? So what I would say, in those days we used to do 7 till 3, 7 a.m. till 3 p.m, or 1 till 9. So the way I used to sell the late shift was this. I used to say to the dentists as well and the nurses, I used to say, look, you know, this is perfect. Are you a late person or are you an early person? Oh, I'm a late person. Okay, perfect. So what you do is you come in late, you do what you want in the morning, the gym or whatever it is you do. You work your shift till 8, 9 o'clock. You go home, you chill out, you have your dinner, you go to sleep, and then you don't need to come in till 1 o'clock the next day. So it's perfect because you get all your activities done then, and you're never in traffic. Because the problem with London, of course, is you're always stuck in traffic somewhere, especially if you start 9 to 5 or even 8 till 4, you're stuck in traffic all the time. Whereas if you're starting at 1 or 12, you'll never be in traffic. If you're finishing at 8, 9, you'll never be in traffic. So that's how I got around it, more around the convenience for them. And obviously if they're early people and you have the privilege of actually giving 2 shifts to 2 different people, that's even better. Oh, I'm an early person, I can't stay after 4. That's fine, you just do all the early shifts as long as you can manage between you. But when you're taking over an existing, it's hard. You can pay them more, but I just think in this day and age where people literally are working 7 days a week, people have to wake up and smell the coffee. You want to keep a job, you're going to need to service the patients. That's why we're all here. Nobody really just wants to come between 9 and 5 anymore.
What about...
Yeah, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, sure.
I'll take one in a minute.
So the Sundays, because you mentioned that's
Yeah.
a relatively new thing that you've introduced. Do you use existing team members? How do you persuade them to work on a Sunday, or do you get dedicated people in to work on Sunday?
So yeah, good question. I mean, I get the existing team to work on Sundays, and again, it works well because you talk about, because none of my dentists are full-time. One's almost full-time, but generally they're part-timers. So the way that I would talk to them, and I just say, look, well, on a Sunday, eventually, you're going to be really, really busy. And that is the case. They are generally very, very busy on a Sunday. So obviously, this depends on where your practice is, of course. But for example, in the new Fleet Street clinic, they're not open on Saturdays or Sundays because they tried Saturdays and it was just dead. Because everyone vacates. Friday, 4 p.m., everyone's in the pub and they're definitely not on the street for the whole weekend. Next time you're going to see them is 7 a.m. Monday. There's no point. So it depends on where you are. But how do you convince them? Yeah, I just say to them, look, you know, if you're going to work 3 days, instead of working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, why don't you work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday? And then if you're working a Sunday, you can take another day off elsewhere. And actually, that's great to be off on a Wednesday or a Thursday rather than a Sunday. Now, this obviously works for people who don't have families. If you have children and little ones, you know, they need your attention at the weekend, right? So, but again, that might work okay because if you're a husband-wife, in a husband-wife situation, if the husband's working or the wife's working, this is great because a husband can take, if a husband works 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, whatever, then the husband can babysit, as it were, while she does Sunday shift. And then during the week, she takes over, or vice versa. So actually, for people with families, weekends can work quite well. It depends. Having said that, I just lost a Sunday dentist, lovely lady dentist who travels from Colchester. She's a single mother though. She's got growing children this age and a bit older. And she did it for about 3 years, but eventually she was worn out because it took her 2.5 hours to get to us, 2.5 hours back. She did it because it was lucrative. However, difficult situation at home. The dad didn't really want to know. Him and his new partner would take the girls, but then after a certain time, they'd get a babysitter in. And the girls just wanted to be with either mum or dad. And I just felt so sorry for her. And eventually I just said, look, you've got to go. You've got to go. So now we've got somebody else who doesn't have family, with children anyway. And he's loving it. I mean, he finds it intense because he's come from a mixed practice background. He finds it intense, but then because he earns well, he's thinking, yeah, you know, I'm up for this challenge. But it depends on how busy you can get the book. If it's just going to be a couple of patients, who's going to want to come in for that? But I don't pay the nurses more. But I do pay the Isha one more because on a Sunday I can't get to another receptionist. So what I do is I pay her time and a half. So she does the both, and she loves it. She's a complete control freak, and she, you know, she's very much like yourself. Yeah, she's and me. But she just wants to do everything herself. So it works quite well with her. She locks the door, goes in, because you don't get so many people calling on a Sunday. It's usually pre-booked.
If I can interrupt you answering on
Yeah.
because I'm working on Sundays. It's it's if your associate understand your business needs.
Yeah.
And there is no questions. And that's it. If he or she doesn't understand, you can give whatever you will wish. It's not wrong.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, when we first started Sundays here in Isha, what happened is the Monday dentists got really quiet. They went really quiet because, of course, Mondays is usually busy after the weekend, isn't it? They come in after the weekend, lots of Monday morning calls. But for about 6 months, Monday trade fell. And the Monday dentists kicked off. They were like, I told you not to open on Sundays. Why are you opening on Sundays? Our books are dead. How could you do this to us? Blah, blah, blah. I just said to them, look, just wait. Just wait. 6 months. If you want to reduce your hours on a Monday, do that, but just wait. It will all balance out because we will get extra patients coming in on a Sunday, and eventually that will balance. The books will just get heavier and it will all balance out. And it did happen. It took about 7 or 8 months, but now Monday's just as busy as Sunday. So it does eventually happen, but they need to understand, they need to have buy-in, because he used to say that to me. He says, oh, you don't need it's the same number of patients, you're just spreading the whole book thinner. And now, when I asked him recently asked him a question about Sundays, and when this lady dentist was leaving, I needed to get somebody else in. But before that, I asked my existing associates, I said, look, before I get someone new, why don't you take up 1 Sunday a month, or you take up 2 a month? That way I don't need to get someone new in, because of course all associates are freaked out by new dentists coming in. Oh my God, my list, my this, and share the patients and blah, blah, blah. So I just said, well, look, I'm offering it to you. Why don't you do it? Oh, yeah, well, you know what? Do you know what? I'll take 1. I'll take 1 Sunday a month, but I can't take any more. But there was no, I don't understand why you need to do this. There was no kind of, oh, well, I don't see the point. He's now got it. And you're right, it's about telling them, showing them why. But that depends on the associates and whether they are quite entrepreneurial or not. If they're not, no amount of explaining will take up. They will understand. Sorry, I was going to, I stopped you mid, you answered it. Okay, great. Anyone else? Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask what you find works better with it, like across the team? Would it to have more part-timers or less full-timers? And also, sorry, just do you controversially like do 0-hour contracts or anything?
So with the first question, I'll answer that because this is coming up in further on. No, with 0 hours, what I do is we have set employed staff. So whether it's a nurse or a receptionist, we give them a certain number of agreed set hours. So let's say it's 35 hours or 40 hours. They will have that as this is how we do it anyway, set number of hours. So whether they do or don't work, they add their hours up at the end of the month. If they're over, then they bank, we call banking them. Because what I don't want to do is pay different every month. I just want to know I've got fixed costs with regards to employees. So I know that, let's say, your monthly fee, your monthly salary costs are going to be £1,200. Your monthly costs are going to be another £1,200. So I know every month 2.4 is going out every month. So then, if they do more, they bank them. If they do less, then they take. Then again they bank them. So in other words, this is banking. And at the end of the month, I get a report saying, oh, I'm 3 hours over this month, or I'm 4 hours under, or I'm 10 hours over. If they're over, it's a bit easier because what I say to them is, oh, such and such is off that month. Can you take that day off? Now, some will say, well, no, I don't want to take that day off. Some will say, well, I want this day off. And that's then a conversation that you have. Try and have it. They've all learnt now, when a dentist is off, try and take your loo time off then. And we kind of keep this tally. It's a bit weird how we keep tabs, but we do. We manage it. So there's no, and then if I have occasional, if it's a temp or if it's from an agency, again, I try and avoid that. Then we either have, again, a rolling tab. I don't put them on a contract, or controversially, if it's really, really infrequent, then we'll organise cash. But that's very, very infrequent. We don't like doing that as a word, as a general rule. But the other thing about part-timers, I'll answer that shortly. Yep.
If you've got multiple part-time associates,
yep.
How do you structure the pay for emergency appointments? Because I'm assuming that every patient will be seen on that day. If their regular dentist is not in. How do you structure that with if they need to come back with further treatment?
Okay, so what we have is, I mean, I might as well talk at this point. I was going to do it later. I can talk now about remuneration. So with our associates, we usually have a sliding scale. of pay, and that is usually between 40 to 45% sliding scale. And we have different bands to which we work, and then they pay 50% of lab bills, or we pay. We also, there's a minimal credit card administration fee as well. But the 40 to 45%, I actually think that's very generous. At Canary Wharf, we used to pay 35 to 40%, and that's because of the higher cost of running the place, being in a mall, all the compliance that we had to work towards, huge costs of running that. And it was difficult trying to get dentists, especially highly qualified dentists, to work on 35%, but we managed it, and the reason is because location, everybody wanted to work in that location. And the way I used to talk about it was, it's a slightly smaller percentage of a bigger pie. So it's almost like saying 50% of £10 versus 20% of £100. It's a very different, because the fees were quite good. So, but the old 50% model, I don't know how many, are any of you on as associates 50%? Which is interesting, because there was a time when we used to do boot camp a few years ago that most people were on 50%. Isn't that interesting? And that percentage is dropping, and rightly so, it's dropping, because well, you'll know as a principal, to actually run a clinic. Would you say that? To run a clinic, paying somebody 50%, you're not actually going to get anywhere. You need to be paying ideally less, but certainly around 40 to 45% maximum. And what we pay our specialists, if they're on the specialist register and they're doing specialist work, 45% flat. But they're the only people who get 45%. Never have I paid 50% to anyone. So that's something to think about. Now, the question was emergencies, yes. So what we do, and this isn't really emergencies, this is anything that might happen. So let's say I do a filling, let's say, and next week, because I'm part-time and I don't work for half the week, or I'm on holiday, you end up seeing a problem with that filling and you end up redoing that filling. Then all you do is you fill in a letter-headed, what we call a cross-charge form. And that at the end of the month gets presented to me, and the principal will take whatever the cross-charge fee is out of my gross and give it to you. So that could be an emergency, it could be just whatever, in other words, if there's a cross-charge, in other words, whatever I've done and there's a fault and you have to rectify it, that's what happens. Generally, however, if I'm on holiday and my patient wants to come and see you, because of a new filling or a new checkup or a new hygiene or whatever it might be, there is no cross-charge because it's just my patient happened to see you. So you just get paid accordingly. We try to stick to the same dentist, but sometimes that's not possible because we're running this customer service type of clinic. And if they want to come on a Wednesday evening at 7 p.m, and I'm not doing one for the next month because I'm traveling around the world, saving the world, then I'm sorry, but I've lost that patient. Yeah, but we try, with new patients, we try and equally, so if you've got 3 dentists, we try and give the dentist equal amounts through the week. But again, that doesn't always happen, because if you want to be seen at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night and you're the only one doing an evening, obviously you're going to get more, right? So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, just a follow-up to that. So if somebody comes in pain,
yep.
And you stabilise them, somebody else's patient, you stabilise them, and then the patient would like to see their regular dentist again for any further treatment. Is there a cost charge?
No, so you would just take the fee for the emergency appointment. So if it's a new patient, which obviously isn't because it's somebody else's, if it's a new patient, you would take the emergency fee and whatever else you do. If it's somebody else's patient, let's say they came in with a hot pulp and I'm the dentist, then you would presumably extirpate, and there is an extirpation fee. I mean, obviously, if that patient came to you and stayed with you, you might not charge an extirpation fee, stage 1 fee and a stage 2 fee. But because they're seeing somebody else, but we're trying to accommodate them as soon as possible, then you would do something where you would charge an extirpation fee, then they would come back to me and I would do the endo. We've sort of trained them in that way, but if you're in an area where fees are an issue, then it would be a conversation between the 2 practitioners to sort of say, well, if the patient is coming back to you for stage 1 and stage 2, I think it's a bit unfair to be charging them an extra £100 or £50 for an extirpation. Do you want instead for me to cross-charge you? Because you're going to be taking the bulk of the endo fee. Does that make sense? Yeah? So it depends on your area. We're lucky enough that we can charge separately for the emergency, separately for each fee. But there have been many times that I've gone in, I haven't charged. So if a patient comes in, needs antibiotics or just needs painkillers or a review or a stitch removal, which I've done, I haven't charged them. But then I'm not an associate. I've been doing it for the goodwill of the practice. And they walk out and they're ready to pay. And I say, no, not at all. Just come and see your regular dentist and we'll sort that out. So I've just done that as goodwill. But if I were another associate, then I would want something for it, obviously. But that's very practice dependent, and it depends on your relationship as well. So what we've now done is inter-practice as well. So in the Fleet Street practice, if any of our patients go from Wandsworth, again, if it's a problem that we don't want to charge the patient for, we don't charge the patient, we set up a cross-charge fee between the two practices. So that's what we do, because at any point we don't want to charge the patient, if at all possible. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you guys do in-house capitation plans? And if you do, what's your preference?
So we do DPAS. We have worked, we do currently have DPAS. And I think for some practices it works really, really well. And they get a lot of business and a lot of continuing, obviously, a capitation fee, and it's really good for cash flow, rent, or whatever you might call it. For us, for some reason, it hasn't worked. In any of our clinics, it hasn't worked. And I just think, also, because our fees are quite good, and they're fully private, we've also not pushed it that much, if I'm honest. We used to, but when it wasn't as successful as we thought, and we looked at it and we thought, well, especially now, you've got to become even more competitive. By the time you've taken 20% off your, you get your checkups, your hygiene, all your x-rays, and then you've got your worldwide emergency cover, and you've got your trauma and all that insurance built in, and 10 or 20% off your fees for regular treatment. By the time you've done that, you're thinking, what's the point? What's the point? But for some practices, it works really, really well. So I would consider it, depending on your location.
When you did have it, or if you still have it, how did you strip it down in terms of paying your associates? Because obviously you're paying the hygienist.
Yep.
How did you assimilate that? So is that, did you sort of say they're collecting money from the plan, or you're paying the hygienist?
Yep. Well, it was a bit easier because at the time we didn't have hygienists, so they would do everything. So we literally split it down the middle. So they would have, let's say the practice, so the plan would not bill you, they would advise you every month of how many patients you've got. Let's say you've got 100 plan patients as an associate. So I would receive the plan to say, Dr. Joe Bloggs has seen 100 patients, but we're paying you the fee. In other words, the principal gets the fee paid. And then you just split it in whatever your percentage is. So they would split, so in other words, it would be split exactly how your normal split is, so 40% or 45%, depending on, that would be added to your gross, if you know what I mean. Yeah?
But if you had a hygienist?
But if you had a hygienist, well then again, let me see, you'd have to just work it out. You'd have you would almost have the hygienist fee added to the gross. You'd work out what the hourly rate was, depending on the plan. And you would have to look at that, and you'd have to split it and work out an equitable way of doing it. I don't know, I can think more on that because we didn't have to worry about that. But there are obviously ways of doing it because lots of plans do work with hygienists. And that's something we can look at. In fact, Wesleyan might be able to help us with that because they deal with plans. It's a good question. Anyone else? Yeah.
Did you try ever to implement the system when you're paying your associate for the first time coming patient less, and then if he comes again or refers friends or whatever, pay more?
No, but that's a way of doing things. Of course, that just makes logistics very difficult. Yeah, I mean, what we have done in the past, I remember having my first orthodontist, who ended up being the best asset in the world. I started him on 40 to 45%. Sliding scale as a normal associate, and after about 2 years he said, look, Smita, says, look, I've taken your ortho book from here to here, I need to be paid more. And I said to him, I looked at it and I said, you've got a very valid point there, you have got a valid point, and you know what, I've never done this before, I am going to put you on 45%. That was very motivating for him. So I think there are ways of motivating them, because if I don't know about doing it for every new patient, the second appointment, that's like, who's got the time to do that? But if you wanted to maybe look at it after 6 months, so you could start them on a lesser percentage and say, after 6 months, if you perform at this level, we can consider this. But you can also work that the opposite way around.
In that case, look, it depends from your marketing team if it brings the new patients, and then his performance could be high, but not because he's performing well.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, if he makes these patients to come again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
and then your marketing thing doesn't have to work
It's
for
not
him
applicable.
that much,
Yeah.
and can make more
Yeah.
people busy another chair and rather him. So that's what I'm saying. So if at the beginning it would be given as a, and stated, you started with this percentage, and then if the patient continues to come to you for 6 months and then, not straight away.
No, no. And that's a great idea, but it's a bit of a moving target, because then let's say you pay him 40%, and then you say, well, if this carries on, I'll pay you 41%. You've got to have a ceiling, because if he's really, really, really successful, where do you stop?
For 1%, because 1% is nothing. I mean, it's something essential.
Yeah.
And because for you as a practice owner, the first time coming patient costs more.
Yeah, of course, a new patient costs more.
Then you have to think about not even 40%, or much less.
Yeah.
But then to give 45. So let's say
A bigger jump, yeah.
35.
Yeah.
But then to give 45. Because 1%.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, the principle is absolutely right. The principle to the opposite is also right. So we did have one dentist who continually, instead of working to the £250 or £200 an hour hourly rate, consistently worked to £80 an hour. In other words, she was just so underperforming, and it was actually costing us money to keep her there. And I had numerous meetings with her. I said, look, if this carries on, I'm going to have to change your percentage to a lower percentage, because I can't justify paying you the same as someone who is converting a lot more than you, and they look at their treatment plan average is, let's say, £1,000. Your treatment plan average is £200. So not only I'm not making any money off you, but I'm actually losing money off you, because if I gave that to that patient, dentist, they would be doubling the income for the practice, of course, for themselves. And she just didn't get it. She said, well, there's not enough patients. I said, look, it's been 12 months and you haven't done one piece of lab work at all. Not a single piece of lab work. It was all fillings. And the thing is that those fillings weren't even, because they on SOE, they're charted as small, medium or large. They were all smalls. So when we did a trawl of all of her treatment, they were all small fillings. But actually, the nurse said, she just does this because she doesn't want to charge them. Or she doesn't want to, she doesn't have the confidence to sell a larger filling. And so it was a really useful meeting to have, and a very useful exercise, because then we also looked at, okay, we're going to, instead of charging, instead of paying you, so we looked at different payment schemes there, because we said, look, if you perform at £200 an hour, we'll give you this percentage. If you perform at £300 an hour, we'll give you a higher percentage, because that is performance related, right? Whether you encapsulate it as a new patient, convert to old, it's basically your performance. If you're working an hourly rate after 6 months, it's based on your performance, right? So if you're earning £300 an hour, I'll give you this percentage. If you're earning less than £50 an hour, I'll give you this percentage, which is about 20%, right? But the whole point of that is to motivate them to get a higher hourly rate, which will only happen if they convert, and it will only happen if they do more treatments. So yes, that you can tweak. It's something which I wouldn't recommend you do at the beginning, because obviously you're just trying to settle everything down. But down the line, there are many ways of doing things. The bigger problem is when you inherit a practice. And I mean, I had somebody recently I was advising who said to me, I'm about to make this purchase in a couple of days. For the last 7 months, everything's gone really, really well. And the old principal who's going to work as an associate, had agreed on 50%. The other associates are on 50%. I think it's high, but I don't know, I can't just change it. I said, no, you can't change it. But now, 2 days before completion, the principal has said to me, he wants me to give him 60%, not 50%, 60%. And he does sedation, and for all the sedation patients, he wants 100% of what he earns. So I said to her, I said, you've got a choice. I said, basically, he's trying to scam you, because why didn't he pipe up about this earlier? Why wasn't he transparent about this earlier? It was all very nice to start with. Now, when you're 2 days away from signing the document, you've clearly spent a lot of money on lawyers' fees, etc. He knows he's got you over a barrel. You've just given up your other job, and now he's putting this on you. And he wouldn't sign that he was staying for a few months. He wouldn't sign. He would, because if you're paying goodwill, if I'm paying goodwill for you, I expect you to stay for a few months, right? Because you're servicing the clients, and hopefully you'll pass them over to me. But if you're going to walk tomorrow when I take over, why am I paying that element of goodwill? He wasn't prepared to do that either. So I think I asked her to be very, very cautious, and she went back to him and she said, look, he not in a million years thought that she would refuse. And she just turned around and said, I'm not going to pay you more than 50%. It's either take it or leave it. I'm happy to walk away. I'm the free party here, not you. You've got a practice to sell. I said, who's going to buy this practice of him? If he wants to sell, he clearly wants to go, which is why he's not signing anything. If he wants to go, you're a ready buyer, about to sign in 2 days. How is he suddenly going to muster up a new buyer? He's not. So remember, you're in a position of power here. Yeah, you're only being fair. You're not asking for anything more than what you discussed. Stick to your guns. Oh, but I want this practice. I said, I don't care if you want this practice. You need to stick to your guns. Listen to me. So she went back and she said, I'm not paying you more than 50%. Take it or leave it. And he walked. And then 2 hours later, he came back and he said, okay, I'll do what you want. So what I'm saying is don't get intimidated by people. What you've agreed needs to be what's done. Okay, so this is a topic we could talk about for hours and hours and hours, but I've got to move on. So I'm getting eyes from people at the back. So when you're looking at recruiting, what you've got to look at is what I've discussed anyway. For me, is that the right attitude is the number one ask. You either have it or you don't have it. And on many occasions, I've chosen the right attitude over the best qualifications. I'm not saying that that's been necessarily the right decision, but on more occasions than not, choosing the right attitude has got me a lot further than just choosing the most highly qualified. I've had many dentists who I've just chosen purely based on their CV. It looks amazing, fantastic, all singing, all dancing. But I hate to say it, they've come in and they've been like robots. And the patients haven't liked them. They've all sort of gone away or gone to other dentists, and this dentist who's amazing has been sitting twiddling their thumbs. And that's not their fault. They can't change who they are. That was my fault in recruitment. I shouldn't have chosen that person. But recruitment is a moving beast. It does always change. But the general rule of thumb is recruit the right attitude for whatever the role is. And compensation, compensation isn't a real motivator, because you're in a difficult situation when you take over a team from somebody else, because if they're not right, you almost sort of want to get rid of them, but you can't, and they're not doing what you want them to do. So you'll offer them a bit more money, or come in on a Sunday, or come in and do this. They don't really want to do what you're asking them to do. Money isn't really the compensator, because if somebody leaves you for 50p an hour, then they weren't really meant to be the right person for your team. They should want to stay with you because you offer them the best all-round experience, work experience, because you're an amazing leader. Your team is fantastic. It's a happy place for them to be. When they come to work, they meet up with their friends. To them, it's not like coming to work, it's meeting up with their friends. That's the sort of atmosphere you want to create, because that's the sort of atmosphere that will keep you there. Otherwise, if it's very tense and it's very, penny pinching, they will leave you for 50p an hour. Or if they're that sort of person, you don't want them. So look at their character traits. When you're recruiting. And again, character traits, you can do disc model, there's so many different things, the way that you interview them, the questions that you ask, open-ended questions, things like, who's the most important person in a practice? And depending on what they say, you get a lot from that answer. There are certain questions which you get a lot back from them, depending on how they answer you. Okay, so when in doubt, if you're hiring, if you're in doubt about a person, just don't hire them. I've been in many situations where I've had nurses who I'm so desperate, I need a nurse, and I've had enough of paying agencies. I still remember driving over to Wolverhampton in the Midlands once, and a nurse worked there as a part-time carer in a home, but she was moving to London in, I don't know, next week or next month. So I happened to be in the Midlands, and I said to her, I'll meet you for an interview. And we met at something like 9 p.m. in the car park outside when she finished her shift. That was dodgy in the first place because she couldn't do any other time. But I just sort of met her, and I spoke to her in the car, interviewed her in the car, and she was terrible. She really was. She interviewed really, really badly. Obviously I didn't create a very nice interview-conducing environment, but still, I just hired her because I was so desperate. And she turned out to be the biggest nightmare. She broke everything. She didn't know anything. She didn't care. It was all about an hourly rate to pay for whatever else. Don't get me wrong, of course money is important, but she had absolutely no desire to be a dental nurse. I was just desperate. I just recruited her. If in doubt, don't hire. Just get temps in until you get the right person to do the job for you. And talking about the best people on your biggest opportunities, usually what you tend to do, we all do it, don't we? If you've got a really, really good working person, whether it's your PM or whether it's your receptionist or your nurse, any problems that come through, you just, oh, you deal with them. Oh, you deal with it. It's a really difficult problem. I haven't got time. Can you deal with it? You're really good with people. Can you deal with that complaint, please? Or can you deal with this issue and that problem and stock and, oh, I don't really want to complain to this supplier. Can you deal with it? The problem with that is that your tendency is that these people sort out all your problems. What you've missed, however, is a bigger opportunity that you should be putting them on the biggest opportunities. Because if they're so good at doing all of this, what else are they going to be really, really good at? What they're really, really good at is capitalizing on the biggest opportunities that you have within your business. They should be dealing with them. Other people who perhaps aren't so good, you then refocus and they can deal with the problems. But always give your best people the best opportunities to work with. Don't make them be your problem solvers. So the top 3 problems from an owner's perspective: staffing, as we've discussed before. Staffing or staff or your team, whatever you want to call them, are both your biggest challenge but your biggest asset. I think from somebody who wants to try and do everything themselves, attempting to do everything yourself doesn't actually get you very far. Because remember, we're no longer an island. We're no longer an associate who just does their work and then goes home. This is about relationship hungry. Remember, one of the slides was about being relationship hungry. It's about actually not just saying, oh yes, you're a receptionist, that's fine, go over there and do the desk. No, it's about saying to that person, as a receptionist, you are my shop window. You are the person who's pivotal to this practice. You will be the one communicator between the labs, between the team in the back office, between the front people, between the people calling, between all the marketing inquiries. You are the biggest asset I have here. You need to be the person who's on fire all the time. Yeah? So that person whom you say that to will be just like, wow, that's true. I'm so important. And it's true. You're not just saying it. They are really, really important. Let them do all of the jobs, not only the jobs that are on the job spec, but make them do all the jobs that are front facing. You can almost step back a little bit. Yeah, people will see you when they need to see you, but really you should be focusing on the jobs that only you can do. And there aren't that many that only you can do. But in my eyes, they're the most important ones, so focus on them. Okay, and remember that exercise we did about your weaknesses. Forget your strengths, because we're all fine with our strengths, but whatever your weaknesses are, all the points that you've written down, remember when you're recruiting and when you've got a team, try and get people for whom those weaknesses are their strengths. Because one of the big questions I ask during interview in whatever role is, give me 3 of your strengths and give me 3 of your weaknesses. Okay, strength is very easy. Oh, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. Weaknesses, not many people can come and rattle off 3 weaknesses because they find it hard, because we're not living in a society where we focus on our weaknesses. So that's a really important one to get. But hopefully their strengths are your weaknesses. Okay, and what that means is that your weaknesses are their strength. The job is done well, it's done efficiently, and more importantly, you get to do what you want to do. So if that means a certain type of dentistry, then it means you can just do that dentistry because you've employed somebody to do stuff which is endo mostly. People don't like doing endo. You do the endo and I'll do everything else. Wonderful. Or whether it's if you don't like managing people, if you're the entrepreneur, you employ a manager who manages very well. Brilliant. You manage all the problems. I'm going to be the ideas person. Or the opposite way around. I need somebody who's out there, moving forward. I need a manager to help me to actually be very progressive, very forward thinking. I'll deal with the nitty gritty because that's what I'm best at. And I need, with your help, to move the practice forward. So their strengths need to be your weaknesses. And it means you do what you enjoy best and you get a better work-life balance. Okay, so yesterday you talked a lot about marketing, and I'm not going to talk so much about marketing here, but just how it's related to your people, because today's more about the people. So marketing, again, I know you've spoken about digital, online, offline marketing. I could talk to you for hours about going and doing stands in the community, mall marketing within Canary Wharf and how that was, and I'm happy to talk to somebody in the breaks about that. We've done all forms of marketing, but my key thing there is to involve your team. Again, it's not about you, it's about involving your team. You can have front of house people, you can have wizards within your team, i.e. you're the referral wizard, or you're the feedback wizard, or you're the person who does the blackboard every day. We have a blackboard. And then internet leads or phone calls or texts or anything that comes in, they could be the internet lead wizard. They're the ones that deal with them. Or leaflet drops. I'm commonly telling, there's only one person in the Wandsworth Clinic that I like giving out leaflets or standing outside the train station to give out leaflets, because she's very personable with people, whereas there's another one who's really good at some other jobs, but she's really terrible on the street. And I tell them that. I just say, look, let's play to our strengths. If you're ever in a situation where we've got a 2-hour gap and we've got these leaflets to go, I want you to go, I don't want you to go. Can you stay and take the calls? Can you go and give out? Again, if you're coming from a place of positivity, if you're coming from a place of I'm doing this because these are your strengths, rather than I think you're terrible on the street, I'm not having you go outside. It depends how you come across, which is where the people skills come in. Okay, and then we have so many different things, business to business leads, like when I said to you about venture, and I've also had relationships with some of the restaurants where we have this thing of we give out vouchers when they give their receipt, you know, when they give the bill for the food, and we give our vouchers to them, and they give basically our vouchers to every customer that comes through the door. So it's about business to business leads as well, and in-house loyalty schemes, as we mentioned earlier. If they take 2 treatments, we'll give them a 3rd free or something like that. Okay, then we're coming to the end of this, don't worry. So it's one thing getting your team involved, and again, this slide actually, again, this is another 3-hour talk if I wanted it to be, but it's about knowing what your numbers are. So if you've had a marketing campaign, like my Valentine's campaign, for example, it's all very well having that Valentine's campaign, but if I don't know what the numbers were that came in through it, what's the point? So yes, I got the team involved, and yes, it was good, and they took the calls and they booked the patients in, but actually, if I don't know what the numbers were, if I didn't ask one of my receptionists to say, every time this offer comes in, there's a code. Make a note of that code, and then follow that code at the end of every month to see what was the total spend of this patient, because that was something, I think it was about checkups, half-price checkups or something. That's fine, you're going to know the half-price checkups that are going to come in, but the total spend or the benefit of that exercise wasn't just the half-price checkups. What did they spend when they came in for the half-price checkups? Because that's all part of what you gained for that campaign. So I got them to follow this up, and after 2 to 3 months, we got to the bottom of it. And I spent in the region of about £2,000 on that exercise because it was very people heavy. And so we know Dental, who I know you saw Mike yesterday, and they made this all happen. It's about £2,000. And can anyone guess what the return on that investment was? 3 half-price checkups. I was gutted. I was sure that this was going to work, but it totally flopped. We're still trying to get to the bottom of it, but it was an absolute flop. So 3 half-price checkups, and I think 2 of them had hygiene as well, but I can't even say £200-300 probably wasn't even gained from that. So that was a complete flop. But if I didn't know, if I didn't do the calculations, I wouldn't know if something was successful or if it wasn't. So always know your numbers. And even with, for example, with this Valentine's offer, okay, it was bad this time, but it doesn't mean in 5 years' time I might find something similar and I won't go for it again. Revisit them. Times change. The world changes. So you never know. Don't get disheartened. Some marketing works, some doesn't. The key is to try everything if your budget allows, and know where the money went and where it came from. So again, just sticking with marketing and people, targets are really, really good to help you keep on track. So, for example, we have financial targets. So every month I set a financial target on the first of the month. Let's say it's, I don't know, £40,000. Let's say this month we have to gross £40,000. If we get £40,000, I incentivise my receptionist, whoever my receptionists are, even possibly the nurse, to say you will get X pounds as a bonus. And guess what? And I'll also buy everybody lunch, and that'll be that. And then after every 3 consecutive target hitting months, if we get 3 in a row, I'm going to take you all away. That's just one of the things we do, but it might not be financial. You might have another really, really good one is to have something on feedback. So feedback being if I get 5 positive feedback testimonials for the website, then I'll buy everybody lunch. Or, you know, so other targets that aren't financial. The bottom line here is it's all target related, because if you don't have a target, if your team doesn't have a target, and they need to be bite-sized targets, so not like, oh, next year we need to make £1 million, but they need to be bite-sized targets that are relevant to each person. That motivates them. and then in turn it motivates you, especially if you hit those targets. Yeah, but the thing is that when you do make a target, has anybody heard of this acronym WIIFM? Anybody know what that is? Well done. Good, Chelsea, thank you. WIIFM means what's in it for me. Whenever you set a target, make sure that it's relevant to the person. So, for example, if I set a target for my receptionist, who I know is very money-minded and cash-minded, and that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. We had this conversation. What's important to you? I like having extra cash because my husband has got his own business, and with that extra cash I can buy the niceties in life. Fantastic, great. So I know that a bit of cash in your handbag is really important to you. So you know what, if we hit this target, I'm going to give you a bit of cash. For others, they might be, you know what, I just don't get any time with my family. So like a day in lieu would be, not a day in lieu, a paid day off would be really, really nice. Or if I'm a manager, then I can get like a duvet day. I get one every month, so maybe I can get one every two in every month. In other words, I get to work from home, or I don't get to work, I just have a day off. You know, I lie under the duvet all day. So I don't want money, just give me a duvet day, give me an extra duvet day. Fantastic. So if I'm making a target, I need to target it depending on what's important to you. So what's in it for me? Really important acronym to remember, especially when you're dealing with your team. So for us at the Neem Tree, yeah, you can read about our exciting few months. We ended up doing a lot, made a lot of tough decisions, learned to delegate. I certainly learned to delegate. I didn't know how to delegate to start with. But it's been an interesting time, a bit of a roller coaster. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way. Definitely wouldn't have it any other way. And this is the Isha team that I took away to Barcelona back in October because they hit three of their financial targets consecutively. We had an amazing time. It was just 2 days. We tried not to go to Saturdays and Sundays because they're our busiest days. So we went Wednesday through to Friday, and we had a great time. I'd like to say we went as colleagues, we came back as friends, and those who played together worked together really, really well. So we had a great, great time, and it was worth it. They were so motivated.
It was cheaper.
Yeah, it was a bit cheaper, but you know what? It wasn't. I don't know if I would do that in the future because the bars and restaurants, etc., were quite quiet. So we did it. I think now we'd include a Friday. We would include a Friday. But yeah, I did what's cheaper in the sense of flights. But I gave them, but flights to locations as well. So, you know, you're looking at locations. I gave them a choice of 3 locations, and I said, well, it's one of these. But they all wanted to go to Barcelona, so it was a bit more expensive. Milan is really good. It's cheap. Amsterdam is really cheap because there's 1 million flights a day. And Paris is really cheap. Well, it's even cheaper now, isn't it? But you know, go to places, yes, that are cheap, but also try and go to places that's aspirational for them as well. I promised them if they meet, I can't remember what the target was now, but if they meet this next target, I'll take them to New York. So they're all very geared up towards this. But clearly, it's going to have to be quite a big one. But I'm now thinking, how am I going to cover the practice? Because you can't go for 2 days to New York. What's the shortest time? But anyway, that's for another day.
So what happens to the practice on those?
Well, good point. So what I'm lucky enough, because I try and get people from the other practice to just cover emergencies, but to be honest, it's just emergencies. So it's not great. And they need to understand that not only are you spending on them, but the loss of revenue of 2 days is huge. But you have to work out, this isn't going to happen when you first open, but you have to work out what's more important. And ideally, if you can get temps in or whoever to manage the practice in your absence, that would be even better.